Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste and good morning, everybody. Shubha Vijayadashami and happy Dasera to everybody. This is an auspicious occasion. It marks the conclusion of the Durga Puja, which is why we have Mother Durga here. And on the last day, it marks the victory of good over evil, or light over darkness. So on Durga Puja, we did it on Mahashtami, that is on Friday. We had some flower offerings on that day, and we are organizing some more today. If those who want to could not come that day, if you want, you can do that after the talk. This morning, our subject is Swami Akhandananda, his life and teachings. The context is that Sri Ramakrishna had 16 monastic disciples, whom we call direct disciples. You can see their pictures here. There are 8 here and 8 there. Swami Vivekananda, of course, is there, and he is the most well-known of all of them. But there are 15 others, and Swami Akhandananda was one of them. Our tradition is that we try to, on or near their birthdays, we try to recapitulate, think about their lives, this life story. One of the spiritual practices is to dwell on the life story of an enlightened person, of a saint. You know, there is the highest form of education is what is called apprenticeship. So you live near, learn from a master, whether you are, learning tennis or medicine or law, whatever it is, you become apprenticed. So, and in spiritual life, that is more true than anywhere else. Now, even if we cannot live near and observe and learn from a master, we can at least read the life story of such people. And it's like downloading. When you read it and visualize it and you like it, you open yourself up to these forces, to these powers, to these high, noble ideas. And we make them our own. I remember this Zen story about 2 young men who went to a Zen master, a renowned Zen master, to learn Zen. And after a few months, there wasn't much teaching at all. Rather, the Zen master made them do all sorts of work in the Zen school, cleaning it and cooking and whatnot. Then one of those students became impatient, and he said to the other student, "Look, he hasn't been teaching us, philosophy, meditation. What's the point? I'm going to leave. What about you?" The other person said, "No, I'm quite happy." "Why? What are you learning here? Why did you come here? Because you're not getting any teachings." He said, "I came here to see how he ties his shoelaces." The little things in life, just to observe and learn. And that is really true when we come to the lives of saints. Even if they do not give us long lectures or write books, but just by observing them and living near them, it's like a process of osmosis. Spirituality is something that can be caught as much as COVID or even more than that by living near a person. I remember, it's a very personal thing, the day I came to be a monk 30 years ago, in the monastery where I joined, at that time the president of the order, Swami Bhuteshanandaji Maharaj, was present there. And I had just come to become a monk that very day. And the other monks in the ashram, one of them told me, "So, President, you're very fortunate. President Maharaj himself is here in this ashram. go to him, bow down to him, seek his blessings. And I remember I was surrounded by monks. I was quite nervous. I was just this youngster. I think I was still wearing a pair of jeans and a T-shirt or something like that. So I went in there and I bowed down. And I was being prompted by the monks at the back. They whispered furiously to me, "Say to him that, bless me, may I become a good monk." So like a parrot, I said, "Please bless me that I become a good monk." And then Bhuteshanji, who would speak very slowly with a drawl, he said, "Haven't you heard the parable of the fossil?" The parable of the fossil is, Sri Ramakrishna said, he was taken to a museum once in Calcutta, and they showed him fossils of ancient creatures here. And everything for him was fodder for examples and teachings. So when he saw the fossil, he said, spiritual life is exactly like that. Notice how this creature who died long ago and staying within two pieces of stone, crushed under that, it's become a stone. Like that, when an ordinary person stays in holy company, you're transformed into a saint. So Bhuteshanandaji, he said, "Haven't you heard this parable of the fossil?" And then I still remember so clearly. If I close my eyes, I can visualize. He's sitting right there and he looking at me and saying, "Sadhuder sange thakte thakte tumi sadhui habe." Staying with the monks, with the sadhus, you will become a sadhu too. This is how one of the powerful ways of becoming spiritual. Sri Ramakrishna also would say, "Sadhu Sangha," the company of the holy. The company of the holy. Now, it's a rare privilege to spend any time with persons like Swami Akhandananda. It does not come so easily. But we have the life story and so many instructive examples, things to meditate upon, contemplate, download them into our own lives. And it happens automatically when we just read it, visualize it, and like it. To like it, you absorb it that way. Swami Akhandananda, he was born Gangadhar Gangopadhyay. That's a lot of Ganga in his name. And he loved, as a kid, he loved swimming in the Ganga. He would take 4 baths in the Ganga every day, 4 times. He lived on the bank of the Ganga. He was born in Calcutta. And later, Swami Vivekananda used to call him Ganges for short. So he would recall in his later days, he was born in 1864, 30th September. There's a connection to Durga Puja, however, because he was born on what is called Mahalaya, the beginning of the Devi Paksha, when the whole process of Durga Puja begins. And that made him 1.5 years younger than Vivekananda. Vivekananda was born in January 1863. So Gangadhar, in his later years, Swami Akhandananda, he would recall that I was a very robust and energetic young boy and very steadfast in my religious observances. He was born to a Brahmin family. His father was a Tantra practitioner and a priest of a temple. His mother, Bama Sundari, was very, very devout. She had 3 daughters before him. She prayed to God for a son, and that's how when the child was born, she named him Gangadhar, which is the name of Shiva, by the way. He recalled that as a child he was also a very strong man. In fact, if you see all the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, you read about their lives and look at their pictures, almost without an exception, they were all very big and strong people, except maybe Swami Premananda, who was rather delicate, and Swami Subodhananda, who was slightly built, but also a tough man. And they are all often heavily built and very strong people, and especially Gangadhar himself. He said, I would swim regularly in the Ganga, work out. He did so much pranayama that he would sink down to the bottom of the riverbed and hold on to a big rock there and sit there to see how long he could stay holding the breath. he, he was a very intelligent kid. His parents would recall later that as a little boy, he memorized, he mastered the English alphabet, A to Z as we would say in India, or A to Z as you say here, in one day, which is a big feat for a little kid. He memorized the Gita and the Upanishads, eventually a remarkable memory all throughout. When he was initiated into the Gayatri Mantra, like a Brahmin boy was in those days, even now, he would repeat the Gayatri Mantra steadfastly 3 times a day, he recalled. He became a strict vegetarian, and not only that, he went to the extent of only eating food which he would cook himself. He wouldn't touch food cooked by others. There were times when he would make a little image of Shiva with the sand and the clay of the river bank and worship it with Ganga water and leaves and flowers, like that. So a very religious kind of boy, but also very, very positive, very energetic, very kind. His parents would talk about how he literally gave away the shirt of his own back to a kid, a friend of his who was poor and had torn clothes. He would secretly give away his own food to beggars who came to the house. So there are many such stories about him in his childhood. He was always fascinated by the Himalayas. And we'll see, throughout his life, almost to a certain turning point in his life later on as a monk. Up to that point, he adored the Himalayas. He had not seen it, but he had heard about it. And one day, as a little kid, I think he was 12 years old, he saw Sri Ramakrishna along with his friends in the house of a devotee, Dinanath Basu. And he saw Sri Ramakrishna going into samadhi, an ecstatic state, and that impressed him so much, he wanted to attain that himself. In those days, kids were married off young. I mean, it might seem very startling today, but Indians of a certain generation know that was pretty common in those days. I remember seeing this old Bengali movie, a black and white movie, where the hero of the movie is sitting and studying for school exams. And the servant comes to his room and says, "Your father is calling you." And he goes, "Yes, sir." And his father said, "Day after tomorrow you are getting married." And he says, "Yes, sir." "Go back and study." "Yes, sir." And that's it. You didn't even know whom you're getting married to and never met them earlier, and you would be with them for the rest of your life. But anyway, his mother was eager to get him married off, and when she broached the subject once too often, he, a jolly kid, he said readily, yes, get me married off. Bring another mother, quote-unquote mother, to the house. She'll help you with the housework. And his mother realized that he would never see women as anything other than his mother. And she stopped mentioning marriage to him after that. Once he did actually run away with a monk, a wandering monk, and his parents were terribly worried. They sent out word to all the important pilgrim centers, to Benares, to Gaya and other places. But luckily he had not gone more than 60 miles far from Calcutta. And the monk said, "Look, you're too young. You can become a monk later, but now go back and finish your studies," and stuff like that. So he came back home to the delight of his parents. In 1883, May 1883, the first time he actually spoke with Sri Ramakrishna, visited Sri Ramakrishna. He was a teenager, 19 years old at that time. He visited Sri Ramakrishna with a friend. And the first thing that Sri Ramakrishna said, looked at him carefully and said, "Have you seen me earlier? Have you ever seen me earlier?" He had. As a little boy, he had seen Sri Ramakrishna in Dinanath Basu's house. So he said, "Yes, sir. When I was a little boy, in my childhood." Now, he was 19 and he looked much younger than what he was. So Sri Ramakrishna said to Buddha Gopal Maharaj, Swami Advaitananda later on, who was an attendant, said, "Oh, Buddha Gopal, come see. This little boy," he says, "he had a childhood, it seems." It seems even he had a childhood. He looked like a child, you know. He says, "In my childhood I saw you, once." And Sri Ramakrishna told him to stay there. Swami Akhandananda later reminisced his first day at Dakshineshwar, how he loved it, going to the Shiva temples, going to the Kali temple, going to the Krishna temples, evening, the arati, the whole mood of the place. it really, he felt at home and very sublime. Sri Ramakrishna called him to his room late in the evening, and Swami Akhandananda later described that it was dark and there was, they give this smoke dhuna, which they, I don't know what you would call it as, sulfur smoke or something like that. It's a camphor smoke, yeah. Which, it was smoky in the room. It gives a very nice smell, actually. We used to do it in the monastery. It was one of my duties at one point. Everyone of us had to do it. I still remember one of our masters who taught us, an old monk. He was very particular about how you have to, give smoke in his room. And it sounds funny when you put it in English, but so you come with this pot which is lit up and smoking, and you give smoke around the room everywhere. And his method was, this old Swami who used to teach us, we would have to give smoke in his room, and he would step out of his room and go to the window, and he would say that from the window he would watch until the door or the switchboard at the other end of the room that disappears in the smoke. Until that time, you have to keep giving smoke. That much smoke he wanted in his room. That was his method of seeing. And something like that, Swami Akhandananda, or Gangadhar, let's call him Gangadhar until he becomes a monk. He said that Sri Ramakrishna was hardly visible in the darkness and the smoke, and Sri Ramakrishna asked him to sit nearby. That night Sri Ramakrishna asked him to stay at Dakshineshwar. Next time he came to Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna initiated him in a mantra. In the way Sri Ramakrishna would do, asked him to stick out his tongue and wrote the mantra on his tongue, and then showed him how to meditate. Gangadhar said that Sri Ramakrishna would ask us, me and other youngsters who became monks, how our meditation went. Were there tears in our eyes? Did we feel an ecstasy? Did we become absorbed and forget the world? And he would be happy if we answered positively to those queries. Sri Ramakrishna taught them in many, many different ways. Gangadhar recalls how Sri Ramakrishna taught them to pray. He says, one day, in front of me, Sri Ramakrishna asked me, "Do you know how to pray?" And then Sri Ramakrishna sat down on the floor like a little child and threw out his arms, weeping, actually tears gushing down his cheeks, saying, "Mother dear, I want only you. I don't want anything in this world. Give me knowledge, give me devotion, spiritual knowledge, devotion. I do not know anything. I cannot live without you, Mother dear." And with arms out like this and tears pouring down his cheeks. And then he went into samadhi. This is how he would teach. And Gangadhar said, you can never forget this. Such a vivid demonstration right there. This is how you pray to the mother. He trained up especially those young boys who would later become monks, and cautioned them. For example, about greed for money or lust. Sri Ramakrishna said once in the presence of Gangadhar, no more than once, he said, "I spit upon greed and lust, greed for money and lust. Those who are greedy for money and lustful, they shall never have the vision of God." In this way, he impressed this idea into the minds of these young boys. Another time, Gangadhar recalls, there was a beggar who came asking for money, and Sri Ramakrishna pointed to 4 paisa which was on the coins which were on there, and he said to Gangadhar, "Go and give the money to the coins to the beggar." And when he came back, he said, "Go and wash your hands with Ganga water," with the holy water, impressing upon him how dirty or how polluting money can be. Now one has to understand this carefully, not misunderstand it, because Sri Ramakrishna did not even touch money, and that impacted Gangadhar. Later on, he wandered all over India in the mountains for years and years without ever touching money. But the point here is not physically not touching money. The point here is transcending this money is central to my life. The goal of life is wealth or money. One might say, no, that's not my goal, but we behave like that. We give tremendous importance to wealth, to money, to possessions. In India, in those days, but even more so now, especially in India and here, of course, all the time, where dollar is king. Yeah? There's a certain sense here, which is not there even now in India, that here, for example, it's not okay to be poor. I didn't realize it until, after a few years here. It's like if someone is poor, it's almost like it's your fault. It's America, the land of dreams. You work hard and become rich. If you haven't, it's somehow your fault. It isn't always. Sometimes it might be, but it isn't always. And also, it doesn't matter so much. So that important thing, not making money central to our concerns in life. Notice, Sri Ramakrishna couldn't touch money, who's famous for, taka mati mati taka, clay or clay and money. It doesn't work so well in English. Rhythm is very much, pun works very well in Bengali. Taka means money, and mati means clay or earth. Taka mati mati taka. And he would hold handfuls of coins and clay and throw them into the Ganga. Boy, Ganga is coming up again and again today. Good. It's good to remember the Ganga. However, notice that the money was right there on the table. And it was used. Sri Ramakrishna told him to give the money to the beggar. Ma Sharada, for example, she accepted money and kept money and used it for whatever was needed for the ashram and for everybody else around. The point here is that, for example, those who are householders, you have a job and you have families and you have things to do in the world, you can't do without money. It's not literally touching money or not touching money. That's not the point. Otherwise, you can just have, go cashless. You can have credit cards, or now you can just tap and you can say, I didn't touch money. Yes, now it's much easier not to touch money. I remember this monk in the Himalayas. When I was there, I heard about him. He had already passed on by the time I went there. He was famous for his renunciation, that he would never touch money. And of course, if you're like that, people will come and give you all the more money. And so what happened? He wouldn't touch money, but he had these long tongs, like pincers. So if you offered it, he would pick it up and keep it in a pot or something like that. No, that's not the point. They're physically not touching me. The point is that this should not at all be central to me. Especially, of course, if you're a renunciant, a monk, and if you are in the world where it's unavoidable to handle money, handle money. And let it flow. Don't be Mr. Scrooge. So, there are so many other wonderful stories of how Sri Ramakrishna taught them. One important instruction which was given specially to Akhandananda ji, Gangadhar, and which is really relevant to us through the centuries, is this. One day, Sri Ramakrishna said to Gangadhar, remember, I'll tell you the original in Bengali and then translate. Jejar ishto shetar atma. Whoever is your Ishta Devata, that is the Atma. That is the Atma, the Ishta Devata and the Atma are one. The vision of the Ishta Devata is equal to self-realization, Atma Jnana. What does this mean? What's the point? The point is this. We study a lot of Vedanta. And in Vedanta, the goal is self-realization. Vedanta tells us we are not just these bodies, not even the mind. You are pure consciousness, pure being, existence, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda. That's what you are. And when you realize that and see for yourself that I am that, then you are free. That is freedom, that is moksha. So this is how spiritual life is framed for us in Vedanta. Now, when we come to a guru, especially in our tradition, and many other Hindu traditions, the guru will say, visualize God in this way. So, a particular form. For example, for Sri Ramakrishna, it was Kali. So, visualize God in this way. Durga or Kali or Shiva. Could be Rama or Krishna or Ramakrishna now. And this is the name. This is the form. This is the name. This is how you repeat the mantra. This is how you meditate. This is how you visualize in your heart. And what would be the goal of this? You would ultimately, the first realization would be an actual living experience of the deity, which you're visualizing. Right now it's imagination. Right now you're repeating a mantra and imagining it, but then you will have a living experience of that deity. That's the first one. Then it goes on further. Now when you do this, then you seem to have two different kinds of spirituality. One is God with form and with name, which you visualize and meditate and repeat a mantra, and you love and adore and you worship and try to serve in different ways. So a very devotional approach and dualistic approach. On the other hand, you have the Vedantic path of self-inquiry. Who am I? I'm not the body, not the mind, I'm the witness consciousness. Then I realize myself as awareness itself. Aren't they different? So aren't we having two different kinds of spirituality set up in our minds? And they are different approaches. But now what Sri Ramakrishna said was very central, extremely important, especially for us in this tradition. He says to Gangadhar, who told us later on. So he says to Gangadhar, whoever is your Ishta, that is the Atman. That is the Atman. That's the real self, the Advaitic self. The Ishta and the Atman are one and the same. Third point, the vision of the Ishta Devata, which you will get by repeating the mantra and visualizing, meditating, the vision you will get, the first living experience, that is equivalent to self-realization, Atma Jnana. So this is very important. I remember I heard it once. I had this question. I asked a very senior Swami of our order, Swami Nirmuktananda ji, who was nearly 100 years old at that time when I asked him. And he had at one time associated with and served Swami Akhandananda, whom we are speaking about today. So I asked Nirmuktananda ji once, again on the bank of the Ganges, on the bank of the Ganga. He's sitting there, and I asked him, Swami, so what is the relationship between the Vedanta we are studying, the self-knowledge we are pursuing, inquiry into Vichara, Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, and the mantra we repeat and the Ishta Devata we worship and visualize? What's the relationship? And then he said, haven't you heard what Sri Ramakrishna said to Gangadhar Maharaj? And which he heard, this Swami, he heard directly from Gangadhar Maharaj, from Swami Akhandananda. Sri Ramakrishna had told him, Jejar Ishto Shetar Atma. The Ishta and the Atman are one, and the vision of the Ishta Devata, when you do attain it, that is equivalent to Atma Darshan, the realization of the self. I heard it from him, and now I've told you. So, I know they shouldn't have gone in when I started the talk. Did you want to come out? Thank you. I wonder what the internet audience is thinking. Yeah. Yes. Sri Ramakrishna, when he passed in 1886, the youngsters, they gathered together in the old monastery in Baranagar and became monks. Gangadhar, who always wanted to go away to the Himalayas, he took the ochre robe which had been given to him by Sri Ramakrishna and secretly left the monastery. But he told his father, Srimanta Gangopadhyay, who was himself a spiritual practitioner and who blessed his son, saying that, may you attain the goal of your life. So this young man, Gangadhar, he goes first on his travels, extensive travels, especially in the Himalayas, So this is the beginning of his travels. He first goes to Gaya, where he met the great yogi Gambhir Nath. Sri M, who had come here. So he belongs to the same lineage of the Nath Sampradaya. Gambhir Nath is a very famous monk of that lineage. Gambhir Nath saw this young man and saw that the spiritual potential of this young man and said, "My boy, stay here with me. You shall attain everything." But Gangadhar was eager to go to the Himalayas. So he says, "My guru had told me that you cannot get an idea of the infinite without seeing the Himalayas or the ocean. So I must see the Himalayas." And Gambhir Nath must have smiled and said, "All right, go on." He went to, in the city of Gaya, he met Durga Shankar, who was a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, with whom Gangadhar stayed. And they spoke for hours about Sri Ramakrishna. And Durga Shankar looks at Gangadhar and says, "I've been speaking to you for hours and your eyes don't blink. This is a sign of a great yogi, of a great meditator, a deeply spiritual person." From there he met Pramada Das Mitra, who became quite important for the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna later on. Pramada Das Babu was a Bengali gentleman, but they had settled down in Benares generations ago. And he was a well-known person in Benares. He was, the British government had given him the title of Rai Bahadur. He was a great Sanskrit scholar. He and his family, by the way, those who are Sanskrit students, you would have heard of the Chaukhamba Sanskrit series. So this is the most authentic series of scriptures published in the 19th century and early 20th century also. In our libraries in monasteries, we had these series of books, and Gita, Upanishads, commentaries of Shankara and all, Chaukhamba Sanskrit series. And these were published by Pramada Das Babu and his family. He was himself a great Sanskrit scholar, and later on became quite close to Vivekananda, and then had a falling out also with them. So this was the first meeting. He was very impressed with Gangadhar, and he invited Gangadhar to his home in Benares, where Gangadhar went and studied further with Pramada Das Babu, who taught him the correct way of chanting the Vedas. And Gangadhar was exceptionally fast. He just picked it up just like that. Pramada Das Babu also introduced him to Trailanga Swami, the great saint who lived for nearly 280 years in Benares. Trailanga Swami, who was silent by that time, vow of silence he had taken, he blessed Gangadhar. And Swami Bhaskarananda, who was a great Vedanta teacher at that time, very well known. And Pramada Das Babu knew him personally. So he took Gangadhar and introduced him. Bhaskarananda again saw the brilliance and the spirituality in this young boy and said, "Stay with me. I shall teach you Vedanta. I'll teach you all the Upanishads and commentaries." And again the young boy, Gangadhar, young man, he said, "That power of sight by which I will study these books, please bless me that let it be turned inwards and I may see God in my heart." And Pramada Das and this Swami Bhaskarananda said, "I see that you are a yogi." From there he goes on to Haridwar, Gangadhar. And in Haridwar, another interesting encounter he had. Chandi Hill is there, Chandi Pahad. This is a Chandi temple, the temple of the Divine Mother there. And on that, a tantric practitioner, Kamraj, used to stay there. And he also recognized the spiritual potential in this young man, and he said, "Stay here with me, I will teach you." So lots of teachers wanted to make him their student. And, I forget what Gangadhar said to him, but something on the lines of, "I must realize who I am." And then Kamraj sadly said to him, "So you want Vedantic self-knowledge. You do not love my mother, my divine mother." So, and then he went on from there to Uttarkashi, to Rishikesh, where the monks stayed by the bank of the Ganga, and they had these cottages, and he saw them, how they begged for food, and then stayed and studied Gita, Upanishads, and would meditate hours and hours. At that time it was surrounded by forests, right on the foothills of the mountains, surrounded by forests, and there were ferocious animals, tigers and bears there. In fact, it was there that Gangadhar heard the story. Just when he was there, he had heard around that time, a tiger had come and caught hold of a monk and dragged him off into the jungle to eat him up, and other monks who were in their little cottages. The cottages are flimsy, made of branches and twigs and leaves. So till they could hear no more, till that point, as the tiger dragged off the monk, they heard the monk chanting calmly, Soham, 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 I am he, I am he, I am that Atman. So this story clearly Gangadhar told. We have heard this story from Swami Vivekananda. It's there in the complete works of Vivekananda. So Gangadhar must have told Vivekananda later on. And Vivekananda repeated the story a number of times here in the United States and back in India also. There was a monastery there which they would ring a bell so that the monks would come from the various cottages and get food there. Gangadhar often used to be so absorbed in meditation, he would not hear the bell. So later on, when he would feel hungry, he would go to the village and beg for his food. From there, Gangadhar goes on to the high Himalayas, Yamunotri, Gangotri. One monk, when he heard Gangadhar was going to go to Yamunotri and Gangotri, which are the sources of the Yamuna and the Ganga, he offered him blankets and some money, which he refused. He finally just took a staff to walk in the mountains. And many, many adventures. But he held on to Sri Ramakrishna. He had such faith there, he depended only on God and nothing else. For example, one day in the high Himalayas, in a small village at night where he took refuge, there was a tiger roaring in the jungle outside, and the villagers, they gathered together in a hut, and they were shaking with fear because those huts are flimsy. If the tiger wants, it can knock down the door. And Gangadhar, he thought, why should I fear? Let's call him Swami Akhandananda because he was already in the cloth. Why I am shuttling back and forth between Gangadhar and Swami Akhandananda was, although he was already formally a monk, the precise name Akhandananda he took a little later when he had come back to the monastery and Vivekananda gave him the formal vows of monasticism and the name Akhandananda. But anyway, he was already a monk there. So he thought, why should I be afraid? Am I afraid of losing this body? I'm not the body. I keep saying that. So he, to the horror of the other villagers, he opened the door of the hut and he walked out. And they quickly shut the door, I'm sure. He walked out into the jungle with the tiger roaring around him, and he sat down under a tree and meditated until dawn broke. So he was like that, fearless. He has left behind, he was a very good writer. So there are books of his travels and his experiences. His first vision of Kedarnath, he says, the towering, soaring mountain. I remember I was in Colorado, in the Rockies, and one of the rangers, he said, when he saw that I was a Hindu monk, he said, but you have come from India, have you been to the Himalayas? I said, I have. He said, those are the real giants. These are babies compared to that. So Kedarnath, when he goes there, he says, vivid description. This mountain, the top covered with, blazing with white snow, reflecting the sunlight as if 1,000 golden rays were emanating from the mountain, which looked like a Shivalinga there. And he felt, in his words, bathed in that golden light flowing from that mountain. And he said, I felt I have left behind the realm of darkness and entered forever into the realm of light. And then he says, my eyes turned inwards from the external magnificence and beauty into inner meditation. See, this is the sign of a saint, of a yogi. We all love nature. Who can be unmoved when you see the vision of, say, the Himalayas or the Ganga or whatever it is, or the Rockies? We are all moved by the beauty and magnificence of nature. But from the outer magnificence of nature, you see, it should elevate us, make our inner mood sublime and turn inwards. The reality is in there. Otherwise, if you just keep on immersing yourself in external beauty, after some time it's just exhausting. You even get used to it. The whole point is the external beauty should, to remind us of the infinitude of God. And then our mind should plunge into that. And he says, I went into a deep meditation. From there, Swami Akhandananda, he went further into Tibet, which was very inaccessible in those days. He walked into Tibet and many adventures. For example, he at one point, extreme cold, and he's not equipped for that. And he fainted and he would have died. But he didn't know it was near a Tibetan monastery. So the lamas came from the monastery and rescued him and revived him, brought him back to life, took him back to the monastery. He always carried a picture of Sri Ramakrishna, a small one, with him. Now remember, in those days, Sri Ramakrishna was not widely known. He was well known in Calcutta, around that place, and other parts of India to some extent. And pictures were rare in those days. Photographs were rare. So people did not know whose photograph it was. And he says, the Tibetan lamas, who had literally no idea who he was or who Sri Ramakrishna was, they took one look at the picture and he said, whose photo is this? No earthly person can have an expression in the face. This photograph. We are not so moved, but they were moved. The higher the spiritual attainment, the more they see. This is not the face of an earthly person. This is veritably a Buddha. Who is this? He stayed with the monks for some time, had different kinds of experiences. At first, they wouldn't let him go ahead. He had to run away from the monastery. They taught him. The Tibetans, for example, Tibetan lamas, they have a technique, because they live in those icy plateaus of Tibet. If you're caught in a snowstorm or you're freezing, there's a technique called tuomo, where they sit in a particular posture and they have a particular pranayama, breathing technique, and meditation associated with it, and the body generates copious amounts of heat. There are photographs of lamas sitting in that posture and practicing that with a pool of water, warm water lying around. Everywhere it's frozen white. And they're sitting in this little pool because the snow has melted around them. They radiate so much heat. They taught him that method. So next time you're caught in a snow blizzard, don't die, because we might not be there to rescue you. And showed him how to generate heat from the prana within the body. The lamas know that, or at least they did. Now they live in India. The problem in India is not freezing, it's more heat stroke. So most of them are now refugees in different parts of India. When he came back from Tibet, another adventure he had was with this Tibetan group of gypsies who were nomads and merchants. And the head of the clan was a very spiritual man. Again, when he went through Akhandananda's meager possessions and he saw the picture of Sri Ramakrishna, he touched the picture of Sri Ramakrishna and went into samadhi. This clan leader of a gypsy clan in the Tibetan plateau. And then he asked, who is this person? It's not, I just touched the picture and I went into samadhi. But I was just thinking of the spiritual attainment of this person himself, this Tibetan gypsy. Then when finally Akhandananda came back to India, to the plains of India, he was immediately arrested by the British police on thinking they thought he was a Tibetan spy. And when they realized he was a genuine monk and not a spy, and he had been to Tibet and learned the customs and some amount of Tibetan language, they reversed their position, and the British government offered him the position of British consulate, the consul to Tibet. Will you become our consul general to Tibet? Which also he turned down. Came back to the monastery. In between, there were some other travels also in India. Once in Delhi, he was sitting in a park on a bench, and he was hungry. But he said he would not go to beg for food unless, he said, a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna comes and invites me to his home for food. Now, where is he going to find a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna in Delhi in those days? Because Sri Ramakrishna was more popular in Bengal and hardly known in other parts of India at that time. And he's just sitting there. A gentleman came and sat next to him and looked at him and saw he's a monk, and he offered him some money. He refused. He turned down the money. Akhandananda refused and turned down the money. This gentleman said, this is wonderful. I have just met one other monk who turned down an offer of money. And Akhandananda asked, who was this? And, this gentleman said, he was Ramakrishna Paramahamsa of Calcutta in Dakshineshwar. So you know Ramakrishna Paramahamsa? He said, yes. I knew him for years and years. And they turned out to be none other than Lakshmi Narayan Marwadi, who you know in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, who had offered Sri Ramakrishna a sum of 10,000 rupees in those days, a huge sum in those days. And Sri Ramakrishna had turned it down. Sri Ramakrishna actually, he said he felt like fainting the thought of accepting so much money. And Lakshmi Narayan Marwadi was delighted to find that this young monk is a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna and joyfully invited him to his home for food. Talk about, I don't think it's a coincidence. Anyway, stunning coincidence, if you will. From there, he goes to Gujarat, very important for the later story of Swami Akhandananda. In Gujarat, first of all, he was the guest of one Shankar Seth, who was a very well-known person there in this particular town. And Shankar Seth was, he had no children of his own, was a very rich man. Now his nephews wanted his property, of course, thought that when the old man is dead, we'll get it. But Shankar Seth was also a devout man. And he loved Akhandananda. And he said to Akhandananda, just stay with me. And he'd spend all the time with Akhandananda and listening to stories about Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, teachings on Vedanta and things like that. And making donations where Akhandananda told him to make donations to various charitable causes, to the annoyance of the nephews who saw their inheritance dwindling. And when Akhandananda wanted to leave, Shankar Seth would not let him go, said, you stay with me. I'll build an ashram, a temple of Sri Ramakrishna for you on my own land. This was too much for the nephews. So they poisoned Akhandananda. They put poison, and he was seriously ill. He didn't die, but he was severely ill. Now there was so this is a story, very important story. There was a very famous doctor in those days in that town, who's a legend in India, in Gujarat and in India today. Dr. Jhandu Bhatt. Many people in India, especially earlier generations, would have heard of Jhandu Balm. Yes. So, same. He was a very well-known doctor in those days, there, and a great man, a saintly man. He was already over 70 years old. He took Akhandananda to his home to treat Akhandananda so that he would recover from the poisoning. And Akhandananda was filled with admiration. This doctor, every day in the morning, he would chant that I do not want, to the Lord, he would chant, I do not want wealth. I do not want name and fame or success. I do not even want knowledge and realization and all that. All that I want is, my Lord, please remove the sufferings of sentient beings, of all jivas. Please remove their sufferings. And what do I want? I want to feel their suffering. I want to feel the suffering of everybody around me. That's all I want from you. This impressed Akhandananda so much. And he did it in his life, this Dr. Bhatt. He would treat everybody without day and night. He would be helping people. All poor people would get free medicine from him. He would follow up and take care, go. And if the patient had nobody to look after them, he would bring them to his home and look after them. So this, of course, had a great impact on Akhandananda. From there, he went on with his wanderings. Khetri, the Maharaja of Khetri in Rajasthan, who was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda, Maharaja Ajit Singh. Now, Akhandananda was fearless. Whoever it was, what he spoke his mind. Whatever was good for that person, he would say. Even to a Maharaja, he said he found that the Maharaja would get up late. And so he told the Maharaja, you eat too much and you get up late. You'll never prosper this way. But the Maharaja, he said, the Maharaja, next day in the morning, when Akhandananda used to get up long before sunrise, I opened my eyes, still in my bed, and saw the Maharaja standing in front of my bed smiling. And from that day onwards, the Maharaja would get up before me. And often I would see him, the light on in his library, even so early in the morning, light on his library, and he would be reading or meditating. He comes back to the monastery. Swami Vivekananda had come, was also there. That's where he got the name Akhandananda in 1890. Then he went off again on his travels in different places. Now, a few more points before I move on. He had a wonderful relationship with Vivekananda. I mean, among all the brother disciples, he had a kind of one-pointed love for Vivekananda. He regarded Vivekananda as his elder brother, and whatever Vivekananda said was gospel truth for him. Once Vivekananda, after coming back from the West to the monastery, he was regaling the young monks and devotees who sat around him with his experiences of traveling in the Himalayas. At one time, he traveled with Akhandananda in Himalayas. Holy Mother had told Akhandananda, when Vivekananda went into the Himalayas, Holy Mother knew that Akhandananda had good knowledge of the Himalayas. So he said, this is our treasure, he said to Akhandananda, take care of him so that he does not suffer for want of food or shelter. So they traveled together extensively. Now Vivekananda was telling everybody the stories of the Himalayas, and Akhandananda would pipe in, supplying information which Vivekananda had skipped over or forgotten, till Vivekananda was very annoyed, and he said, keep quiet, don't speak so much, meditate. And so Akhandananda immediately started meditating in the whole group of people. And Vivekananda went on with the story. At one point he was talking about this big fish they had seen in a lake, which is very startling. In the high Himalayas, you don't see big fish at all. Big fish he had seen in a lake, and he turned to Akhandananda and said, Ganges, what was the size of the fish? And Akhandananda, with his eyes closed, said, like, and everyone around burst into laughter. Akhandananda himself wrote that in the monastery once a discussion went on Vedanta philosophy and the doctrine of reincarnation. And it was 2 a.m. when finally all the monks went to sleep. But at 4 a.m., that was the time when the bell was rung, Swami Vivekananda woke me up and said, go ring the bell and wake them up. And I said to him, Swamiji, they just went to sleep. They went to sleep at 2 a.m. And Vivekananda said, have we established the monastery for them to sleep? Go and wake them up. And he went around to the curses of the monks, but they couldn't do anything because they knew he had been sent by Vivekananda, and he had to get up and go and meditate in the morning. They had this wonderful, jovial relationship among each other. When Vivekananda passed away on 4th of July 1902, Akhandananda, he rushed there. He sat by and wept. And later Akhandananda said, Vivekananda is not gone. I had a vision of him after his passing, after the passing of the body. Otherwise, he said, I wouldn't have lived. He said, I was going to throw myself in front of a running train. When Vivekananda came and caught my hand and I saw, he's there. So that kind of devotion he had to Vivekananda. He also was the first to put into practice Vivekananda's teaching of serving humanity, seeing God in humanity, seeing divinity in humanity, and serving them. You know, all the social work, the service activities which are done by our order in India, the person who put them into practice first was Swami Akhandananda. How it happened is like this. One day, he was in the monastery suffering from malaria. Those areas, even now they are malarial, unfortunately. So he was suffering from malaria and lying with fever in his bed. Suddenly he had this vision in that state, a vision of the baby Krishna, Gopala, crawling forward, and he saw from his body emerge the form of Mother Yashoda, the mother of Krishna. Now, it was such an amazing vision, which is, maybe with his eyes open, that's not mentioned, or whether it was in a dream. He saw that the baby is crawling forward towards Mother Yashoda, and Krishna, as the baby, is asking for food, begging for food. And Mother Yashoda is consoling the baby, singing and playing with the baby. And then Sri Ramakrishna appears and shows him this. Look upon this. Isn't this wonderful? Now this made a tremendous change in the heart of Akhandananda, that vision. Till then, he had regarded self-knowledge, that I am Brahman, that I am that. That is the highest spiritual knowledge. The devotional moods he had regarded as inferior, the bhavas, the relationship with God. But henceforth, he always thought of himself as the mother, and of all creatures as his children, that whom he would take care of. He thought of himself as Yashoda and all creatures as Krishna. He saw the Krishna in all creatures. How it practically happened? Even then, he had this, later on in life, he said, I had sort of made up my mind after the passing of Sri Ramakrishna and then after the passing of Vivekananda especially. I would just go up. There's nothing more tying me to this world anymore. I would just go away back to his favorite Himalayas and Tibet and all and spend the rest of his life in meditation. But before that, he wanted to see some places in Bengal, and so he went to Navadvip, the place of Sri Chaitanya, and then he went to Murshidabad. And this Murshidabad became very central. It's a district in Bengal. It's a heavily Muslim majority area and very poor. Even now it's poor. At that time also it was very poor. And it was subject to famine at that time. People were starving. So he had gone there. One day, he says, what happened was, he saw this Muslim girl who was about 13 or 14 years old, holding a pitcher for collecting water. And the bottom of the pitcher had dropped out, as it happens in old pitchers. It had dropped out, had broken. And she was weeping uncontrollably. So Swami Akhandananda asked this girl, why are you crying? She said, Father, we are desperately poor and we have nothing at home. There's one pitcher for cooking and one pitcher for collecting water, and it's broken. Now if I go back like this, my mother will beat me, and I'm afraid, and that's why I'm crying. And he was so moved by this, he took the girl to a shop, and he had some money, a few paisa. So with that, he bought a new pitcher for the girl, and with and also a packet of muri, puffed rice muri, which is something common in Bengal for the girl. The moment he bought this, before he could take the change back from the shopkeeper, he was surrounded by a crowd of hungry children, all begging to be fed for food. So he spent the rest of the money for feeding the children, for giving muri to the children. And then with a troubled heart, he went to the hut where he was staying. A group of people came to him and said, Father, that's how he was known there for the rest of his life, Baba, his father. Father, the Gaya Vaishnavi is dying. Can you help? This is an old lady who was a widow and nobody to look after her, and she was dying. And he thought, what can I do? But he went. He saw that she was lying in a pitiful state. She had dysentery, she was covered with filth, and she had not eaten for days. He cleaned her up. He went and begged for a cloth for a sari from a rich person in a neighborhood. He went and begged for some more food. He had no more money left. And then he fed that dying lady. The old lady, she said to him, I think you were my son in my past life. And he said, why in your past life, mother? I am your son in this life. He went back to his hut, and with a sore heart, he fell asleep. He thought, I'm going to run away tomorrow. There's nothing, I can't bear this. This is too much. And the whole countryside was starving. And in his dream, he heard this voice 3 times. Stay here, stay here, stay here. But what can I do? You will see. Just stay. So he stayed. And from the next day onwards, he went to the local zamindars, asked them to donate some food from their stock. It was there, food was there, but not in the hands of poor people. It's many years later that a young boy saw the Bengal famine. This is long before the Bengal famine, but 1942, the Bengal famine. Young boy saw this, and he realized the causes of famine. Yeah. And later he worked on it, and he got the Nobel Prize for it. And today we know him as Professor Amartya Sen. So that it's not always lack of food, it's lack of purchasing power. Yeah. So there is food, but you don't get it because you don't have money to pay for it. He organized relief activities there. He was a good organizer. He got people together. People could help, but they couldn't help themselves. They needed somebody who would take charge and organize things. At night, he would hold Gita classes for the villagers. He got the local zamindars together to gather whatever food could be and feed organize feeding for the poor. He wrote to Vivekananda about what he was doing, and Vivekananda was delighted. He said, this is exactly what needs to be done. He sent 2 monks to help him and arrange for raising money for the work. The British magistrate and district judge, they immediately stepped in to lend a hand to Akhandananda and the people who were working together with him. Eventually, a center was set up, which later on became the ashram. It was first set up as an orphanage for the children whose parents had died from starvation. They had fed the children and they died themselves. So the children were taken in by Swami Akhandananda in the orphanage. And that's how the ashram first started. He knew many important people in different parts of India. He wrote to them for money. And it's an interesting incident. When he wrote to Pramada Das Mitra, the great scholar of Benares, who had by that time become very well known to Vivekananda and others. Swami Vivekananda would, if he had doubts in his early days about Vedanta, he has written letters to Pramada Das Babu. I've read a letter where Vivekananda writes some 10 or 12 questions, important questions about Buddhism, Vedanta, to Pramada Das Babu. We don't have the replies from Pramada Das Babu, but we have the letters from Vivekananda to Pramada Das Mitra. Akhandananda naturally wrote to Pramada Das Mitra also for help because he was a well-off person. Pramada Das Babu wrote back to his friend, Akhandananda, young friend. He was like a mentor he had been to Akhandananda. He wrote back criticizing him, saying that, what is this you are all getting involved in? You were doing the right thing. You were studying, meditating, begging for your food, wandering from in the mountains. That's your monks. You should do that. People are starving. Let the society take care of them. Why are you getting involved in all this? You shouldn't be involved. You should, meditate and teach Vedanta and try to attain enlightenment. So there's a fiery letter which Akhandananda wrote back to Pramada Das Babu. There he says that you are talking about enlightenment. According to your own Vedanta, he's saying to Pramada Das Babu, who's a teacher of Shankara Vedanta, the Atman is ever enlightened. Why try for the enlightenment of the Atman which is already enlightened? And the rishis of the old who have given you Vedanta, God as it were, these are his words, God as it were is whispering in my ears. Those rishis of the old who have given you Vedanta, your Upanishads, your Vedas, look around you. They are here, starving, naked, for the want of a piece of cloth, starving for want of a morsel of food. They are all around you. The divinity whom you worship is in front of you begging for a morsel of food. And he writes that these are my object of worship now. And I shall serve them. If it leads me to hell, so be it. And in this fiery way, he says, I have, if you read the original language, it's electrifying. Pramada Das Babu was miffed. He didn't reply anymore. That created a break between him and the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. They forged ahead. And he was... there are so many amazing descriptions of Swami Akhandananda there in that orphanage, bathing a little orphan boy and chanting the Purusha Sukta, which is done when you bathe the deity. When you do a puja and you bathe the deity, the Purusha Sukta, he is chanting that when bathing the little child. He literally saw God in all of them. He learned agriculture and he started plowing the land himself and teaching the farmers better methods of raising new crops, multi-cropping, of protecting the plants from the pests. He put on trousers and a bandana. By the way, there's a video of him. There are videos of only 3 of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Shivananda, Swami Subodhananda, that's just a few seconds in Belur Math, and Swami Akhandananda. An American crew, of course, who had visited, they caught it in black and white, still silent movie. You can see it. It's available on YouTube. There are other Swami Akhandanandas later on, but this is the old one. So if you see Swami Akhandananda old movie or something like that, if you search, you will find it. If you see it, you will recognize it immediately. Just a few seconds, he's sitting with that bandana cloth tied around him, long flowing white hair, powerful big man, sort of dominating the room. You can see him like almost radiant in the room. People around him, somebody is fanning him. This was in his old age. A group of Americans had gone from here to visit him in Murshidabad. The specific place is called Sargachi. Even now it's pretty backward, pretty poor. Not as bad as it used to be. And obviously nobody's starving now, thank God. I've been there a couple of times at least. It's a very big ashram there, thanks to Swami Akhandananda. Thousands of students have studied there. There are training schools for trades, for agriculture, for women. Wonderful work. And most of the people who get the benefit of this work are Muslims actually, and the local poor people there in that area. Akhandananda plowed the field, taught them better farming, gave them adult education for the children. When one of his orphan children died, he wept like a mother. He sat and wept like a mother. So this was... in the letter to Pramadadas Babu, he said, you mentioned that I wandered in the Himalayas. Yes, I did. But that mood has completely gone and I wonder about my younger days now. I do not feel like traveling anymore. And here I find divinity here all around me. He would visit the monastery in Belur, the headquarters of the order, Swami Brahmananda. By the time Vivekananda had passed, Brahmananda was the head. They all loved him. And he was childlike and jovial. They all would try to keep him there as long as possible. But he wouldn't stay away long from his orphan children. He would be always eager to get back to Sargachi, the orphanage there. And sometimes it led to very funny scenes. Swami Brahmananda, who had a tremendous sense of humor, he was the president of the order after Vivekananda had made him the president. So once Swami Akhandananda was visiting the monastery at Belur Mutt, and they kept persuading him to postpone his return to Sargachi. And finally he would not stay, and he said, I have to leave. So that night was the train, and everybody came to see him off. And a palanquin, in those days, palanquin is like a little box in which you sit and 4 people or 8 people carry you, depending on your weight. They carry you. So Swami Akhandananda sat in that palanquin and the people lifted him up, and the monks with Swami Brahmananda solemnly saw him off. But Swami Brahmananda had secretly told the palanquin bearers not to take him to the station, so dark, to take him round and round in the monastery grounds in the dark and then bring him back after some time. So it was a merry journey, and Akhandananda thought it was going well. And then the palanquin was set down. He thought he was in the railway station, and he got down and he found Swami Brahmananda standing there in front of him with all the other monks receiving him back again. It was too late. The train had been missed, of course, and he had to stay. So once when Swami Shivananda was the president, after Swami Brahmananda passed away, Swami Shivananda was the president in the 1920s. On one of his visits, Swami Akhandananda had come and they were conversing about the old days. And then he went back to his room. There was a monk assigned to look after Swami Akhandananda. And it was late night. So the monk made a little bed for himself on the floor and went to sleep. Now Swami Akhandananda, he looked at him with horror, and he rushed to Swami Shivananda's room and started banging on the door of the president of the order at 1 or 2 in the night, deep night. Brother, listen. And Swami Shivananda said, what happened? That monk, that young boy who was supposed to be with me and attend to me, he's sleeping. He's sleeping in the night. Brother, tell me, did we ever sleep in the night? Has he realized God? How can he sleep? The monk by that time had woken up, and I'm sure he had gone red in his face. And Swami Shivananda smiled at him and said, brother, but can everyone be like you? He will certainly realize God in time, but give him time. And Akhandananda went back to his room, still shaking his head and muttering to himself, sleeping in the night, and never heard of such a thing. And the monks would make fun of him also. The young monks, they looked upon him as a grandfather, When he would come, once he came to visit Swami Sarvapriyananda, who was the secretary of the whole order, general secretary of the order. And the young monks surrounded Swami Akhandananda and said, you have to feed us rasgullas. We know you're a rich man. And Swami Akhandananda took it seriously. He said, where will I get money to feed you rasgullas? And he would keep his money. The old monks, I have seen this. They used to keep money tied up in the knot of their dhoti there, like this. They would roll up there because they didn't have shirts or pockets. So if somebody gave them offering, they would put it there. And they started tugging at his dhoti to see if there was any money there, which he had, by the way. And he was so angry, he caught hold of the monks and dragged them to Swami Sarvapriyananda and said, "What kind of training are you giving them, Sharat? These boys, they're after my money." And Sharat Maharaj, he knew all this fun, and he said, "Well, if they're asking for rasgullas, why don't you give them? Feed them with rasgullas." And then finally he did. And turned out he had actually got the money to feed the young monks with rasgullas. It was difficult, very difficult to stay with him. I've heard from senior monks who have stayed with the direct disciples. It's all very well to read about them in books and give lectures about them. You would not have lasted a day if you stayed with them. It was extremely difficult. He wouldn't bear any kind of laziness or laxity. And when it was necessary, he would scold. For example, he saw one brahmachari, a young monk, sleeping in the afternoon. And he was horrified. The usual afternoon nap. He said, "You're sleeping in the afternoon." "Well, I never." I don't know when you're supposed to sleep, but if you can't sleep in the night or in the afternoon. He said, "You've become a monk. Don't just lie there. Do something. If you don't have any work, read something." And then he said, these are literally his words, "Read geography for heaven's sake." And there were monks who ran away from the order because they couldn't stay with him. And the general secretary of the order, Swami Sarvapriyananda, knew this. So we have heard from Swami Bhuteshanji, the president of the order. He told us that I was saved once. So Swami Sarvapriyananda would find different ways of protecting the brahmacharis from Akhandanandaji. If Akhandanandaji liked somebody, he said, "This is a very nice boy. Give him to me. I will put him to work in the orphanage in my ashram." Once he selected somebody and said, "Sarvapriyananda, send him to me." And Sarvapriyananda didn't want to send him. He knew he wouldn't last. He said, "All right," you can't say no to him. You have to say, "All right, he will go to you. But remember, he's a city boy. And what does that mean? He is used to eating luchis at night, which is a delicacy, a fried bread. Those who are good with breads, they know that what a luchi is. In Indian language, it's called a puri." Mm-hmm. And Akhandanandaji said, "I live in one of the poorest parts of the country. People don't have enough food to eat. Where will I make luchis for this boy? No, thank you. I don't want him. He can stay with you." So that boy was saved. When Swami Bhuteshanandaji's time came, Akhandanandaji saw him as a young monk and he liked him very much and said, "I like this boy. He will be of good use to me in the ashram." And said to Swami Sarvapriyananda, "Can you give me this boy? I'll take him back to my ashram." And Swami Sarvapriyananda said, yes, certainly. But there's one thing." "What now?" And says, "This boy he's very interested in Vedanta. He's a very interested in Vedantic studies. And you are an enlightened person. So you will have to teach him Vedanta philosophy every day." And Akhandanandaji said, "I have no time for all of this. Where will I find time to have classes on Vedanta philosophy for this one boy?" "No, thank you. You can keep him." And Bhuteshanji in later years would say, "I was saved." When the next Swami, after Akhandanandaji passed away, the next Swami went. I've heard this story from senior Swamis. The next Swami went. It was Swami Premeshanandaji, who went to take over the ashram, which Akhandanandaji had left behind. He found utter chaos. Because there was no structure or no routine. Swami Akhandananda, he lives in a perpetually elevated spiritual state. Now you meditate and go into samadhi. Now you go out there and till the field and now you serve and the little children, cook for them, bathe them, or look after the sick children. When is the time for food? Nobody knows. When is the time for meditation, worship? Nobody knows. And so Swami Premeshanandaji had to bring the whole thing back under a particular structure. And the monks who were there also were like Baba, like Father. They were not used to the usual ashram structures. It was a very interesting story. But it's like staying with an inspired person, a greatly inspired person. But it's very difficult to keep up with such a person. 1934, when Swami Shivanandaji passed away, Swami Akhandananda was made the president of the order. There are also many stories. For example, 1936, when the centenary of Sri Ramakrishna was celebrated, So a book was published, a souvenir, about Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna was born in 1836, so 1936, 100 years. Now at that time, Swami Akhandananda was the president of the order. And he was asked to write a message on the centenary of Sri Ramakrishna. He refused. Said, what centenary, what birthday? Sri Ramakrishna is the Atman, is Brahman, is ever present. There's no birth and death for such a person. And you can imagine the monks rolling their eyes. He could be difficult. It took a vision from Sri Ramakrishna, who appeared before Akhandananda and told him, write the message. And so Akhandananda wrote the message obediently. Swami Akhandananda, he wouldn't become the president. When they went to him that you are the next president, he refused. But they knew that he loved pens. And somebody said, we will give you this pen if you become the president of the art. And then he said, all right, I'll sign then. Although that might be a story about Swami Vijnanananda, who was the next president after Akhandananda. Anyway, as president, he did tour different parts of India, the Mumbai ashram at that time, the Nagpur ashram, initiated many people into spiritual life. I have met monks who were initiated by Swami Akhandananda ji, who lived with him. This merry group of spiritual adventurers. He was an extraordinarily good writer, wonderful conversationalist. There was an attempt to bring him to the West. Swami Abhedanandaji wanted him to come to the West, but he refused. He said he wanted to stay with the children there in Sargachi. So that was another phase of his life as the president. Even as the president, he would shuttle back and forth between the headquarters in Belur Math and the ashram in Sargachi. He would mostly stay with the children, the orphans there in Sargachi. And sometimes he would come to Belur Math. In fact, the last time he came, when he fell desperately ill, 1937, I think it was February 1937, if I'm not wrong. He fell ill, and so dire was his condition. There was no medical facilities there at that time. And they said, we have to take him. He's the president of the whole order. We have to take him back to Calcutta. So they arranged to take him to the train station and then take him by train to Calcutta. The poor people heard about it when he was leaving on a stretcher, and they gathered in large numbers. And remember, many of them were Muslims. They gathered in large numbers, weeping and saying, Father, get well soon and come back to us. And then in the train itself, he lost consciousness. They brought him to Belur Math. That whole day, night, and the next day, doctors, the best doctors, struggled to revive him. I think 7th February, if I'm not wrong, 1937, Akhandananda passed away from this mortal body. So leaving behind some books, his tremendously inspiring example of utter renunciation, the pursuit of self-knowledge, of Atma-jnana, which he did attain, and then the devotional side and seeing God in everybody, and giving us a format, a paradigm in which we can all follow. How many of us can wander in Tibet? He used to be called the Ice Baba because his skin had been burnt by exposure to the sunlight at the high Tibetan plateau. They did not know about protecting themselves in those days. Who can live like that? Without touching money, wandering in the mountainsides, meditating in the deep jungle with a tiger roaring around you. I remember once in the mountains, the forests above Mayavati, I had gone to meditate in the forest, and there's a cage in which the human beings sit and meditate, and you can lock the cage. I thought, how silly. It is a beautiful forest to meditate in. Why go in the cage? And I sat in the forest, and then I realized why the cage is there. Because every little twig snapping, every little movement in the jungle could just be a bird, which just you feel like it's a bear, or there are bears and leopards. At least when I was there were no Royal Bengal tigers. And you could hardly keep your eyes closed. For not meditating on God, you meditate on bears and tigers then. Then I realized the purpose of the cage. For lesser mortals like that, we need little security outside to close our eyes. So I went in. I remember once a person came to me asking for advice about meditation, and he said, Swami, I can't meditate. He had a certain mental issue. He said, if I close my eyes, I feel somebody may punch me. We think it's a silly thing, but in the forest there I realized not so silly. It's just a version of that. You're sitting there. Why would you think a tiger is going to come and eat you up? Though it could, but the possibility is there, and therefore you feel so scared. He sits in knowing there's a tiger there. He sits in the forest and he's able to meditate. That's the important thing. Bravery is one thing. With such control over the mind, he becomes absorbed in God. He utterly does not care about the physical body. How many of us can live like that and practice like that? But what we can do, that what Sri Ramakrishna showed him, look, the cute baby Krishna and Mother Yashoda playing with the baby and feeding the child, and that attitude he had towards everybody in the world, everybody, as they are my children, I am their mother, and I will take care of you. And that's what he did till the end of his life. That is something that we can emulate. It's not so difficult. And that can tremendously transform our inner lives and give us joy, peace, deep meaning to life, and ultimately God realization. I pray to Sri Ramakrishna, Ma Sharada, Swami Vivekananda, to the Divine Mother Durga, to bless all of us, to protect all of us, and inspire us towards spiritual life. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. Now do remain seated. They'll come. Yes, come. Those who want a flower offering, they will go with. Is the Ganga water there inside? See, if it's there. Is it there inside? The Kamandalu?